name is Dr. Michael Pantalone, and I'm a motivation expert. Now, everyone has someone they'd like to influence or motivate, but very few people know that there's a scientifically proven way of doing it in less than 7 minutes. My instant influence method is a 6-step approach that can motivate just about anyone in 7 minutes or less. My fully customizable approach takes 6 simple questions to get someone from a no to a yes. I can put this package together for you, your business, your organization, or your meeting. A fully customizable program. I work very closely with my clients to make sure that they have what their audience wants. If you're not happy, I'm not happy. So if you're interested in having your audience get motivated and learn how to influence the key stakeholders in their business, I'm the guy that you should take a look at. So I look forward to you viewing my video and look forward to a message after it. Good morning. I'd like to take you all back to the early 90s for a moment to tell you a story. Okay, so for some of you that may be a fun trip, and for others I'm not sure. But come back with me to a time when I was a brand new psychologist, ready to take on the world, green as can be, but someone who was ready to take on the challenges of mental health and addiction problems and God knows what. I was so inspired that I even did this commute from Eastern Long Island, New York, all the way to the Bronx. But I loved my job, I loved the commute, and I loved the neighborhoods that surrounded the hospital where I worked. And let me show you. It was Arthur Avenue. Anybody ever hear of Arthur Avenue? The Little Italy of the Bronx? Thank you very much. Okay. This is a place teeming with Italian-American history, some of the best restaurants in all of New York City. Most of the Italian restaurants in the city got their bread and their meats and their cheeses here. But every morning I'd love to stop and get my hot cappuccino and Italian pastry and just really enjoyed the atmosphere here. In fact, if I'll give you a little history, it's where Robert De Niro discovered Joe Pesci, who was a singing maitre d' at a restaurant at the time. It's where they filmed A Bronx Tale. So this was inspiring too for me. But not 200 yards down Arthur Avenue was the South Bronx, Fort Apache, the Bronx, the most dangerous neighborhood of New York City, right next to Arthur Avenue, which was the safest neighborhood for 13 years running. This dichotomy was unbelievable, going from one spot to the next, to burnt out buildings, rife with crime, poverty, homelessness, HIV, AIDS, mental illness, addiction. But even that didn't diminish my enthusiasm until one fateful day, when I came to work and I see most of our staff standing outside of the hospital entranceway, looking up at the sky. I had no clue what was going on, so I rushed to my unit chief and I said, "What's going on?" And he goes, "Look up there." And I didn't. I just looked right at him and I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "Look up there. That's your patient on the ledge of that building threatening to jump." I was stunned. My heart stopped. Remember, this is 2 months on the job. I said, "What do you want me to do? Who should I talk to?" He looked me dead in the eye and he said, "Don't worry about it. He's not going to jump. Just go to the ER and start working with our patients and I'll be in there in a few minutes." Now, I don't mean to make light of this grave situation, but I was so stunned that I just did what he said. I walked into the emergency room and I started talking to patients. But on that day, above all the cries of pain in the emergency room that you would typically hear, all I could hear were doctors and patients arguing. Doctors saying, "You have to do this. Why didn't you go for that checkup? Why didn't you do this? You have to stop using drugs. You're going to kill yourself." Patients arguing back, "Who are you to talk to me like that? You don't know me. I did it. I can't do that." All I heard was arguing. Nobody was listening, and nothing was going to change. That's when I realized that about a week earlier, our entire team was talking to that poor guy who's on the ledge of that building in much the same confrontational way. So I had a major aha moment where I said that if we were going to influence these patients, or anyone, that we're going to have to radically change the kind of conversation we have with them. Now, I just want to give you a context to this. So pause for a second. Think about your worst day at work ever. Okay? Take a second. You got it? Okay. Now put yourself back in time to 2 months on the job, 2 months into your career. This is a shrink's worst nightmare, right? A patient up on the ledge. So this was very motivating for me. This influenced me to try to change a status quo that perhaps are similar to status quos you have in your business that are very hard to change. But we were determined, my colleagues and I said, what's out there in business, in sociology, in psychology, anywhere? We went through everything. What's out there that tells you how to talk to someone who is very resistant to change? And lo and behold, what we found was consistent across multiple disciplines: business, psychology, sales, economics. You have to change the conversation. The conversation cannot continue to be the same logical, you need to do this or else. Or look at this, this is a great thing to do. We'll have great results if we do this. It doesn't work. Even when you're a doctor talking to a patient and you are absolutely textbook correct. The doctors in the ER were right. If these patients didn't stop doing what they were doing, they were in fact going to kill themselves. If the deals that you need to make in the next year don't happen, really bad things might happen. Or if you make them, really good things will happen. But communicating in that rational, logical way, as much sense as it makes, does not address the people who need to be influenced. Those who are saying no. Those who are saying yes, but over here are doing things that communicate no. We have to change the conversation for those people who are resistant, or for those people with whom you're negotiating. I know we have two sides of the table here for these few days. It's the same issue. We may be resistant to what someone's offering on this side, and they may be equally resistant to what we're offering. If we persist with what makes perfect sense, what I'm telling you is that you won't garner or exert as much influence as you can as if you change the conversation the way I'm going to tell you we changed it back in the South Bronx. Okay. So I don't want to leave you hanging, but that guy on the roof, he didn't jump. We worked with him. Hours later, he came down. He came back into the hospital. He actually turned out to be one of the first participants in a study we did of something that was then called motivational interviewing. A very different way of talking to people. It's sort of the anti-confrontational way. And when we took a bunch of our patients, 120 something, and half of them got the standard, you better go to your outpatient appointments when we discharge you from the hospital or else you're going to keep getting sick. And the other half of our patients got a very brief thing that we called motivational interviewing, the anti-confrontational approach. And wouldn't you know that those people who got that very brief interview went to their follow-up appointments at over a 250% improvement over those who didn't. And that patient who was on the ledge of the building, we tracked everybody for 3 months. 3 months down the road, he was doing great. Now, we didn't have money or funding to follow through and see where people were years later, but I had the very fortunate accident of seeing him walking down the street of Manhattan some 10 years later. Now, I can't attest to his health. He looked happy. He might have been high, who knows? But he looked happy, he was content, and most of all, he was alive. Okay. Now, what does this have to do with all of you, right? This is my inspiring story of why I developed instant influence, but why is it relevant to you? Because what I have found is that what worked in the South Bronx has worked in Connecticut at GE, has worked at Bayer, has worked at the National Institutes of Health, has worked with the Smaller Manufacturers Association. It even worked with my own uncle's electrical contracting company when he was having trouble with some employees. And by the way, that's where I had my start. That's what made me want to go into psychology. That's fine. This works across the board. Yes, a lot of CEOs that I've worked with would like not to hear that what worked with motivating a drug-addicted, resistant person will work with him or with his employees. But it does. So what I'm going to share with you today is 3 aspects of the instant influence approach. It is something that will help you as soon as you walk out that door. So even though we started way back and in the South Bronx, when you leave here today, you'll be able to do these 3 steps. And you'll be able to influence anyone you'd like. Yourself, your kids, your spouse, be careful. The suppliers out there, the executives who are there to look at those services. That's my promise to you. But another reason this may be of interest to you is that you may be one of these confrontational bosses. You may have someone in your charge who is a confrontational person. You may either get the blank stare and no response, or you may get a harried response. This doesn't work. I know you've heard that 100 times, but today what I'm going to give you is an alternate to try out. Don't take my word for it. What I'm going to give you is something that you can test out, and if it works, then it works. Okay. So what's the bottom line of this approach? Let's keep it practical. The bottom line is that people only listen to one person. We have a door prize for the person who gets it. Who is it? Huh? Themselves, of course. But how many times have we heard this? How many would say more than 10? Right? We know this. How do we get people to listen to themselves, but in a way that garners influence for you? The way to do it is to take this radically but easy, different approach to talking with people who are resisting you, even if it's a friendly resistance, and to get them to convince themselves to do what you would like them to do. So again, influence gives you the perception that you're going to coerce, you're going to magically do something and get the person to come to your side. But in fact, instant influence is an ultra-brief method of 6 simple questions to get someone to convince themselves to do what you would like them to do. But we do have some people for whom it's tougher than others, right? How do we motivate this guy or this guy? Yeah, well, we can move him out. And maybe in today's world, we have 100 other people in line waiting for his or her job. But that's not an efficient way. You have people out there who look like that or like that, who have motivation inside of them, who can be influenced. Or at least, if you have some ambivalence about letting someone go or not dealing with that problem, versus taking 7 minutes to try a different approach, you may just turn that person around. So before we get into the actual questions, and I will show you what I mean. I'll show you how to do the questions on yourself, on your kid, on a supplier, or for suppliers to do it with the executives who are here, the decision makers, any way you'd like. But let's take a baseline little quiz. It's a self-quiz. I won't ask you to answer. But look at this question here. Which of these would you say to influence someone to follow company procedure? And I'm saying that broadly. Think of anything that you would like someone at work to do that they're not doing. It could even be you. So ask the question of yourself. It could be someone who doesn't come in on time. It could be a manager who's not fully engaged. It could be your partner who is not buying into the innovation you would like to see happen. So which of the following would you say? Would it be number 1? What do you think is really getting in your way of doing this? Would it be number 2? Every time I bring this up, we have a 10-minute argument about it. Yet you keep talking to me about it. Why is that? Why do you keep talking to me about it instead of changing the subject? Number 3, once you get going, you'll see how good this is for you. And number 4, you've been a huge asset to this company. So it would be great if you could just do this to set a good example for the new people. Anyone want to take a stab? Number 2 is correct. Now I see the looks of surprise. How could that be correct? How could that be a good and influential, motivating thing to say? Every time we've talked about this, we've had a 10-minute argument. Why don't you change the subject? Why do you keep talking to me about this? How could that possibly